All right, it's time for a little update. All the track is in here at Clifftop, finally. All the wiring's in, all the switch machines are in and working. I do have to wait until I get fascia on here to get the buttons like you've seen over there at the junction. Right now I'm just throwing the switch machines using their address. So what I'm using here is these hair mobile decoder or stationary decoders, and I program them. You can see here this is switch 44, and even though I'm going to provide a button, out here in the fascia, they're still programmed to an address where if I want to throw them with the throttle, or who knows, maybe someday I want to monitor them. But anyways, I just program them all to an address, and then of course they also have the auto throw wired up, so I can try to eliminate as many derailments as possible. But I got all this in here, and probably the big news is that I've got the strip tipple in with some tracks. I just have a temporary piece out the back there, but at least I can back into it and see how it's going to work. I just clamped this control panel up here. I still haven't modified the brackets here or anything, and the wiring you can see here is still pretty temporary as I test this. I have not hooked up the camera yet. I did get a selector switch in here so I can switch between the three cameras that are underneath the loading shed there. I've also raised up the roadbed in here 3/4 of an inch, and I'm not happy with how sloppy this is done here. Originally, like I said in a previous video, this was down on the top of the grid work here, and then I just wanted it a 1/2 inch higher, so I thought, well, I'll just put these 1/2 inch pieces of plywood under here and glue them, and that was fine. And then I wanted to go 3/4 more higher, so I cut some 3/4 inch plywood and pried these off of the top of those, which was a lot harder than I thought. And I put the 3/4. Now, I mean, it's all going to be covered with scenery, so it doesn't matter in the end. It's plenty strong, but it just looks kind of sloppy. And if there's any doubt in does structural adhesive work, so I put that piece underneath the back there because there's nothing holding that end of that tail track up. And you can see it's pretty close to that stack up of plywood there. I could barely get that pried up enough to slide that underneath there. It would not budge. And so that stuff is really strong. Anyways, what that did for me was that greatly reduced the grade right here going up to the junction. And I actually haven't tested it with a loaded train to see if it's going to be a problem, but it definitely looks a lot better. If it's still a problem, what I can do is, this is kind of a level spot right here. I could probably tip that a little bit, but I want to try to keep that level because there's a chance that someone could set out, some cars right here, and so I just want a little bit of level track there. If not, we'll just have to figure out a different way to do it. Another thing I did here is I finally finished 3D printing all of these pieces up here to hold up the LED light strips. And I've got a couple here that I'm just testing because one of the problems with the PLA is that it can soften when it gets hot. Now, these don't generate a lot of heat, but they generate a little bit of heat. And if I take a temperature on these, they're at 40 C. And the reason why I measure it in C is because the 3D printer reads degrees Celsius. And the PLA melts at about 185 C. And you would think that would be enough going from 40 to 180. But I'm finding that it's just a tad bit soft and pliable. And you go over here where it's not on, and it's much more rigid. So I only did a little bit before I thought I'd better test this out here. So what I think I'm going to do, and also considering how hard this has been to put these on, is I think I'm going to bend a piece of aluminum that has this compound angle on it here. So what you see here is that there's two angles. There's this steeper angle to throw the light farther back, and then there's a more of a 30-degree angle to kind of bring it down closer here. And I'm doing that because it's a lot wider right here. In all the other areas of the layout, I just have the one angle on here, which is this angle here. The other thing I did is I wanted to make these curves in here, but what happens is that all these faces are straight, so they're kind of like segmented because these strips don't like to bend around corners. They're not flexible, so those will all be individual pieces anyways. So what I'm thinking about doing is cutting little 8-inch pieces of aluminum and then just make that bend and just make a whole pile of them, and then I'll mount all the LEDs on the pieces of aluminum first, put a little construction adhesive on there and just stick them up there, and it'll make it a lot easier than trying to mount 5 LED strips on every one of these things upside down and backwards. This is really the only part of the layout that's kind of a real problem. I guess maybe over in Clifftop or in Landisburg it's going to be a little bit of a problem, but you know, maybe when I get over there I might think of something different. This was only because everybody talked me into making these curved fascias down here. I wanted to make a curved valance up here to match it, so I made all these pieces here so that all follows all the way down. So here we have an empty coal train going up the reconfigured grade for the very first time. Now I know it's going to make it because it made it in its original configuration, but this is really the actual first time I'm running a train up it. Now I'm going to take this train all the way to Clifftop and I'll back it under the strip tipple and we'll see it load. And this will be the first time I've actually run a train up there to load it. And I've tested it, of course, to make sure everything was still working and wired it all up, so I actually know it works. But you know, it'll be fun to kind of see it all happen in real time anyways here. So rather than bore you here, and of course there's our friend the squeaky cars in that cut, but rather than bore you here, I'm going to go up and we'll just meet this train up at the junction and then follow it into Clifftop. So as we watch this train come up towards the junction, this is the upper end of the switchback. You can see these old chunks of scenery I've kind of laid in here. This will kind of give a good example of a little bit of what I'm planning here. Is that, of course, I've got another train sitting here, but there'll be a creek, or Mans Creek will come through here. It'll go underneath this spur to Mine 7, and then it'll go down and drop some elevation and go down that way, and it'll kind of look like it disappears around a corner there. But that's kind of the optical illusion I'm planning on for this spot. So this train has just come through that really steep spot down there. Well, that's such a cool piece of track there. I love that. And now we're just going to come through the junction here. Now as I get both trains in the shot here, a little work train that's up on the Mine 7 line. What I really like about this spot at the junction is it's just so up close and personal here, with it being pretty close to the edge of the layout. And this is about my eye level right here. Stop squeaking. So as we watch this train come down here into the Clifftop area, got a cut of cars that are going to be out on this one mine spur here. And if you're at the Twin City Modelers Retreat, these were the cars I had on display. I just unpacked them actually the other day. Not sure, I didn't count. Is there 8 or 9 cars on that train? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8, so 8 in a caboose. So now we'll come down in here. So far so good, nothing's derailing. So we're just now entering the runaround track here at Clifftop. And that's this really long, kind of curved turnout. Not my favorite turnout. I'm not a big fan of curved turnouts, but it works. Looks really good. So this part here, again, like I've said before, it looks really busy, much busier than the prototype area would look. I wish I could have kept it more sparse, but one of the things I'm going to try to do in here is make sure some of these side tracks are really weeded over and buried so that they're not as pronounced. I'll make the main line through there more, visible by keeping the weeds a little bit more free and the ties more exposed, but in here I'll bury all these sidings a little bit more, and I think that'll help give the illusion that the main line's the only track in town. You can see I got a couple of cars over there in the car shop, and now we're going to go into that three-way turnout down there. And that three-way turnout was a little bit of a bugger because I actually had a wire crossed in there, and I couldn't figure out, what was going on to make it short out, but it's working good now. So before we back this train under here, I'm going to have to lose this caboose here. And what I've learned is that the caboose does not go into the strip tipple. So it can't be part of the train. So we've dropped the caboose over here on the main line. And now we're going to back the whole string up onto the strip tipple. So now we got to go back up, get the caboose. This will put the caboose on the back end for the trip down to Sewell. So now what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to back it as far as I can down the spur here, which I think is 4 cars past. I've been finding it's a little bit of a challenge to stop right at the right spot. So right there probably looks pretty good. So we're going to be loading the first car here. Now we'll load the middle car. And now the last of the cut there. Kind of like to get one chute started, then I'll pull the other chute. Okay, so that's 3 loaded. Pull those out. do that all over again. So that car, I got to pull ahead just a little bit more. So this car's got a really full pile. I went pretty high on that one. We'll see how that works out. So what I really like about that board back here is it stops the pile from falling off the back side, and I get these cars pretty full. And you can see that one's leaning to one side a little bit. So I'm gonna pull this one out a little bit here, because I have one more on the end of load there. So I'll drop this one here. Okay, so what I've done here is I put the loaded cars out on the main, and I'm just backing these last two underneath the tipple here to finish out this 8-car cut. So I've got this one a little too close. I got to pull it ahead a bit again. It'll take some practice to figure out the sweet spot here. What I like about these servos is I got this really nice control over the gates and how fast the coal comes out. I'm actually going to pull this ahead and try one of these middle doors here. So this is one of the lock doors. It's actually between the cars, so I have to lift. Oops, what happened there? I thought I had the lid all the way down. Okay, so I just realized what happened. This number 8 car back here had a broken, or not a broken, but a dislodged door mechanism. I forgot about it, and when I just tried to put coal in it, it actually dumped out the back side, and I could hear the coal going down. I have these slots over here that you can't really see, but it's just exactly for this purpose. So that car I'm not going to be able to load. Let's see what kind of a mess it made back there. Yeah, see the door back here is opened up. So we'll just leave this car here. I'll move it over later on to the car shop. Get that one worked out. So now what I'm doing is I'm just coming out on the main here, and I'm going to put this this cut on the end of that, pull the whole thing in, and go around the other end of it. So I guess that proves that this is pretty new. You know, this is the first time I'm really running these things, so you guys are seeing it the same way I'm seeing it. Little tweaks and tunes here and there. So what you're seeing here is actually a surgent coupler and a KD coupler. I still haven't converted all the way back over yet. And they will actually couple to get them just right. See, they're coupled up. pull that ahead. So the other thing you didn't see when I first came up here is that maybe if you heard it, you heard the circuit breaker trip when I went out on that three-way turnout, and I forgot to cut a gap up there. So between the time that I brought the empty train up until I loaded it, I actually stopped the camera and had to cut the gap and then put that all back together. So this is actually the next day. So now I'll pull down here through the three-way. Hopefully it all works good. So far, so good. Okay, you can see here I've got the those tortoise mounts over here, and then you can see the control cables coming back here, and then those wire throws that I made over there, both connecting the three-way turnouts points. So we're going to back through it here, and hopefully if everything goes well, there's no shorts or derailments. Okay. Haven't been through this turnout yet either, so we'll see how this one goes. Alright, that's a good sign. So I'll just follow this down around until we get to the other end of the train. So one of the kind of neat things with these auto throws is there's a little secret. If you know where the gap is, you have something metal like this surgent uncoupling, you can just go touch the gap and it'll throw the turnout. And you can see they're not aligned, and now you have to go in there and open the knuckles, pull them into alignment, and then you can couple up. It probably wouldn't work bad on a two-man crew, but that's just really tough to do all the time. Every now and then it just gets really frustrating. I sure like the looks and the way they operate, but in an actual operating session, they're pretty frustrating. Alright, so let's see how this loaded train pulls up out of Clifftop now. This will be the first time ever. So now it's hitting that reduced grade area. It's actually been on it since the curve turnout. The curve turnout is actually the start of it. So far it's working out good. That's a heavy train now with all that aquarium rock. I mean coal. So here we are moving through the junction now. About ready to take the switch down the mountain. For fun here, I moved the scenery on the right over closer to the tracks. It's got the wrong shape, but it does kind of reinforce the mountain scenery that's going to be in here. So there's the problem you can see with the KD couplers, is that, see that accordion action on the caboose? That was the reason why I went to the surgent couplers. But there's ways to overcome that with the KDs. I just have to do some modification to the way the centering spring works, and that'll take all that slack action out. It's kind of interesting if you're watching this train. Notice how the cars are just kind of bucking back and forth a little bit. The locomotive's solid. That's that gear drive that's in those shays that keep them from lurching going down grade, but the cars are still really pulling that slack in and out. I'd hate to be riding in that caboose. And some of those right there are the surgent couplers that are still doing that, but there's some KDs. You can see their wires hanging down right in there, and it gets worse. See that car right there? That's all that KD spring going in and out. So we'll have to take care of that once we get more into operation. So now we're making it down here into the runaround. This is the middle of the switchback here. And we're going to take, because there's no other train up here, we're going to take the main line, which would be considered normal operation. So with our train fully at a stop here now, I'm going to have to cut the locomotive off and the caboose off and then swap the ends. So we're going to pluck the caboose from what was the back end, and we're going to put it down at the end of the track there, and then we'll back the whole train into it. I think on the prototype they probably rolled it down there using gravity, but that just doesn't work in a model railroad, so we have to do this extra step. So now we're just going to back the whole train down and get that caboose. That should place us just past the turnout going down to the lower switchback track. Now with our switchback turnout thrown, we're about ready to head down the lower leg of the grade here. So this turnout here marks the bottom of the grade. This is where the dump truss will be located, so off to the left there will be the future dump trestle. You can see here I've got a piece of homosote set out there to kind of simulate where the dump trestle is going to go, so I can start planning it. I may actually install that piece of homosote and put some flex track on there just so I can check out the shape of it, and if I like it all, and then use that as a template to build a new dump trestle. But we'll see how that goes. That's kind of being put on the back burner for a little bit here, but this would have been the spot that'd be the end of the line for this train. It would dump this train, and then it would turn around and go back up to the top with empties.